A man armed with 2 pistols this morning went on a shooting spree in 2 Arkansas towns, killing 7 people and wounding 4 others. Police say the suspect, Gene Simmons, had just...
Tonight we are learning more about an alleged murder-for-hire plot in Hot Springs.
His mother tells me she can't believe what has happened in her small community.
Brand new video just in from inside an Arkansas nightclub where a shooter opened fire.
I have a location in rural Crawford County to where the possible location of Cassie may be located.
In Bentonville, Arkansas, the hometown of Walmart, a trial is about to begin over the mysterious death of a...
I'm your host, Nicki T, and you're listening to Strictly Homicide, an Arkansas true crime podcast that discusses lesser-known cases out of the natural state. Thanks for listening to another episode of Strictly Homicide Podcast. I want to say thank you to all our patrons and everyone who rated and reviewed the show. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or any other major podcast app. Make sure to stay tuned at the end of the episode to hear a few promos from some of my favorite podcasts. Warning: Strictly Homicide covers cases that involve sexual assault, violence, and homicide. Episodes may contain explicit language and are not suitable for young ears. Listener discretion is advised. Thanks for downloading episode 15 of Strictly Homicide. This episode's going to be different than what you're used to, but I'm so honored to be releasing a collaboration with the amazing Kate, host of Ignorance Was Bliss. I'll first tell you the case and a little about the area, but then I'll go straight into the conversation with Kate. So for this case, we'll be discussing the case of Charles Singleton, who murdered a young business owner in Hamburg, Arkansas. Hamburg is in southeast Arkansas and has a population of just over 3,000. Being the tiny town that it is, I wasn't able to find too much about the area. But it is home to the annual Armadillo Festival, which is held the first weekend in May. Shockingly, there is a list of notable people, and that includes NBA star Scottie Pippen. Other notable people are Charles Portis, who wrote True Grit, 2008 Miss Teen USA Stevie Perry, and NBA player Harold Kane. Charles lived on death row longer than any other inmate. Singleton's execution was scheduled 5 times before it happened. The victim was Mary Lou York. She was a young business owner owning York's grocery store. On January 6, 2004, after years of appeals, Singleton wrote out his final words. They referenced several religious quotes, and then he received his last meal, which consisted of a cheeseburger, fried eggplant, green tomatoes, sweet potatoes, baked beans, potato salad, donuts, and 2 vanilla milkshakes. And then at 8:02, he was executed by lethal injection. So I'm Nicki T, host of Strictly Homicide, covering Arkansas true crime cases. I try to focus on lesser known cases, avoid West Memphis 3 and Boys on the Track. I'm so bad at this.
Yeah, I have a moment of like, I have forgotten my own name now. Shit. But this is Kate, and I host the Ignorance Was Bliss podcast. I am a former crisis clinician and forensic psychologist. And so I talk about the people that we lock up and how we decide. And so we talked about doing a case together because I really like crossovers and interviews whenever I can get them because it's easier for me. I'm kind of lazy. So there's that. And I don't remember what case we initially talked about, but
I can't pronounce his name yet, so
well, then it doesn't count.
Yeah, Zachary something, but it was a weird case.
And we may come back to that because we may have to. But then somehow or other, something came up referring to this case. And it's kind of an important case to me and legally. And so I thought it would be a good one to land on.
Yes, definitely.
So let's start with just what we know about the crime and the facts of it, because sort of the and I don't want to get too far into the legal weeds because I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
But that's where the interesting part happens to me.
Definitely.
And when I say interesting, I mean fascinating, but not, I mean, obviously the interesting part is a woman was murdered. So we'll get there. Here, let me tell you the whole of what I know about this guy up until age 21. And then you can tell me if you have found anything extra. All I know is that he was born on March 29th, 1959, that this crime...
Sorry.
That's fine.
I
Was
have
that
dogs.
you or your dog?
No, it was my dog. I'm sorry.
That, or you might want to see a gastroenterologist. Anyway, this guy was born March 29th, 1959, and the crime was committed in October of 1979. So he was 21.
Very young.
20, something like that. That's all I know.
Yeah. I couldn't find anything on his life prior, his family. I couldn't even find any information that his family has talked about him or his childhood, growing up, schooling, nothing. I couldn't find any of that.
I mean, he was a black man in the Deep South. And so part of it is that record keeping wasn't considered as important.
Yeah. And this was this was the bottom of Arkansas. It was southern Arkansas. So it was definitely down in the Deep South.
And he walked into a grocery store on the evening of the October. No, I'm sorry. I don't even have that correct.
June
I know
1st.
the crime was in June 1st.
Yeah.
But the trial was in October, and that's what was so wild to me about it, I guess, is that, now go ahead and try to get a murder trial through that fast.
Yeah.
Especially given the issues of competency that came up here with this guy. But so I had that backwards. So the crime happened June 1st. He walks into a grocery store, a guy, which totally sounds like I'm telling a joke, right? Guy walks into a grocery store. Not a joke.
No.
He walks into a grocery store, and the owner is 19-year-old Mary Lou York.
Yes.
All that we know is that it was about 7:30 p.m. and she starts screaming because she's been stabbed in the neck, and he runs out. I couldn't even confirm that he got money.
I was looking for that as well, because it was someone did hear her say that or I think she told the cop that it was a robbery, that he walked in and said, "This is a robbery," grabbed her by the neck and just started stabbing. And that's all. I could not find anywhere that he got any money or he even asked for any.
I did read that there was very little money found in the store.
Okay.
So at that time of the day, it seems like there would be. But again, I don't know. I don't know where he went. I don't know how they found him. Like all of these things that I feel like I should know. I feel like I should be able to find. I just couldn't.
And I even pulled up court documents, everything, and it does not list it on there. I mean, I probably could try and get more information, but it's going to take, a trip to some government offices around here.
Right. No, I follow. And at the end of the day, it's pretty clear that those details are just the ones I like to be able to picture the full narrative for. But there were some very clear, solid circumstantial evidence.
I kept seeing overwhelming evidence. Like that was the phrase I saw over and over again. And she identified him. 2 witnesses identified him. So
one of the witnesses was his cousin.
Yes. So I guess that's where they're getting the overwhelming evidence, because it was his relative. It was someone who knew him,
Yeah. And she said his name. She knew him. She had befriended him in some way. And she kept saying, Charles Singleton just stabbed me.
Yes.
Which, is fairly unequivocal. And in a lot of court cases, that might be considered hearsay, right? To accept the testimony of somebody that can't be cross-examined. But there's a loophole about the dying declaration. Which has to do with if someone identifies their killer as they're literally physically dying, then the court is allowed to accept that as evidence.
I didn't know that.
Which I accept, like,
Yeah, I
when
do
else
too.
are they going to
I really
testify?
do.
So,
Yeah.
fair enough. So that's basically what happened. Like, that's what we know.
Yeah.
And she died of 2 stab wounds to the neck, died mostly of blood loss over anything else.
Mm-hmm.
She told at least 4 people that it was him.
Yeah.
Between two onlookers and then doctors and a cop all heard.
Yep.
So he was arrested. He was tried beginning on October 24th and convicted on October 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, that's fast.
Yeah.
And then and the sentence was death. So Arkansas was not fucking around.
They, to this day, it's still the same way.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And
And the part that really got me, and I guess, I would have just obviously known this anyways, but like reading it, was that he was actually sentenced to the electric chair because of when it was originally. Mm-hmm.
And then this is in 79, and then nothing happened for like 2 years, right? He just went to death row.
Yeah.
And for 2 years he sat on death row. And it wasn't, to my understanding, it wasn't until he was on death row that questions of his mental capacity and competency were raised.
Yes.
Which is part of, to me, why the trial was so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So quickly after the crime, because I'll tell you what, if you can get a forensic psychologist to do the necessary evaluations and write it up in less than 3 months, you have, that's not going to happen without an act of God in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't. It takes a while, because part of it, a lot of the evaluation is just talking to the person, and it's also evaluating them by watching them when they don't know you're watching.
Yeah.
And so you have to spend some time on the unit doing sort of the pretend, like, oh, I'm just updating these charts over here, don't mind me.
See, and that's one thing that sparked a discussion when I was talking to my husband about the case was, he referenced a movie, and I can't remember what it's called. I haven't seen it, so it's on the list. We'll probably watch it tonight. Was with Edward Norton, and he plays, I think he kills like a priest and some woman, and he plays that he's mentally retarded. And in the end, well, I don't want to give away the movie, but he's faking it somehow or something like that. I haven't seen the movie, but, and so that I've never worked in a hospital or been, in the psychology department, but I always wonder, like, that it's got to take a really long time to evaluate someone, because you have to be able to watch them when they don't think you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just throwing stuff around over here. Don't mind me.
It makes me mad too. No.
It takes. Okay. Doing assessments, psychological assessments, can range of all sorts, right? But even what I would consider the simplest are things like figuring out whether somebody's got a learning disability.
Yeah.
Okay. And that takes a solid 18 hours, I would say, overall. Because it's like, I mean, you can do it in probably 10 if you're really feeling motivated. Of testing and then scoring the tests and interpreting what the scores mean and writing up a whole thing. And you have to break that up over 2 or 3 days, because usually that's kids, and kids just can't do that. They get tired. And with forensic tests, that, forensic just means court involved. So it can mean custody situations. It doesn't have to mean anything big and exciting. But in all of them, the courts, for reasons that I'm not going to go into, except that our justice system is stupid. That's my clinical assessment. Courts like tests.
Yeah.
They like numbers. And so even though I find tests to be less reliable and valid So reliable means you get the same score if I give you the same test twice. And valid means, does it make any sense in the real world? And testing is neither, for the most part. Like if you do really well and somebody says, oh, you've got an IQ of, I don't know, 3,047. All that means is you're good at IQ tests.
Yeah.
That's all it means. It doesn't make you smarter at school or anything else. So whatever, that's a whole rant for another day. But the point is you have to do a certain number of tests, and depending on what they are, they take a while.
Yeah.
Because like some of them are even automated now, but you have to watch the person take the test. So it means watching someone in front of a computer. Go ahead and stay awake for that. And then the computer spits out scores, but you still have to put the scores together to put words to it.
And just the testing, because I was tested for ADHD, and I am diagnosed ADHD. That alone, well, we thought it was anxiety, but turned out it was undiagnosed ADHD. And so I had to go through, it was like a block of 4 hours. It was awful. Like I wanted to shoot myself afterwards, but it was because that's a terrible situation to put someone with ADHD. But yeah, it was like 4 hours of nonstop, computer.
It's hard on everybody, and that's without breaks. Right.
Yes.
Then you add just necessary breaks because you want the person to be at their sort of mental peak.
And then evaluation. I mean, oh God.
And then, for things like, is somebody actually crazy? Right. That stuff, you gotta watch them. Because like in the world of criminal justice, there's a lot of reasons why somebody might fake.
Yeah.
So there are parts of the world, parts of their lives where, say, you might get the same person who wants to fake good and then fake bad.
Yeah.
Right. So like before their criminal trial, they want to fake bad. They want to be like, look at how crazy I am. And then as soon as they get found not guilty by reason of insanity in their mind, then they want to fake good as soon as they get into the psych hospital so that we'll let them go home, because in their mind, that's what's going to happen. And it doesn't quite work that way.
No.
There's a lot of motivation why somebody might not show you their true actual baseline. So you have to observe them. And that means the person has to maintain symptoms 24/7, including when they're sleeping.
Wow.
That's no joke. Like that's hard to do. Right? And so, but what that means for the psychologist is that you have to check in on certain aspects of their behavior 24/7. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to walk into the unit while they're sleeping, but you have to know what happened while they're sleeping.
Yeah.
And you have to know how they are in early morning and in the evening after hours. And there's just, and I'm not going to give away a whole lot more than that, except to say, like, if somebody is motivated to be found not guilty by reason of insanity or to avoid a trial altogether, like, they have to stay in it and they have to know the disorder cold.
Yeah.
Because
that's the part right there that's going to be hard to fake, if you ask me, unless you're a really, really, really intelligent person. And then it's like, why are you doing this?
Exactly. You have to know, because there are certain symptoms that like everybody thinks, oh, this is what schizophrenia is. So yeah, not really. And so that is going to take the psychologist a long time to gather.
Yep.
And so the whole process of forensic evaluation is not an overnight deal. If you really are obviously not competent to stand trial, that has almost nothing to do with your diagnosis.
Yeah.
Like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, all of these terms that I can throw around, that you can have schizophrenia but be totally legally sane.
Yes, exactly.
The bar for legal sanity is real low. My 6-year-old probably meets it. Because you basically have to know the difference between right and wrong.
Exactly.
So would you have done this crime in front of a police officer? Most people know the difference there. And you have to know, like, who your lawyer is, and you have to be able to hold a basic conversation with them. You have to know who the main players in the courtroom are. You know, and sort of how the court process works. You know, you can't get up and take a shit on your defense table. You know, not quite that extreme, maybe, but you know what I mean. Like
you never know
why you're there.
Yeah.
And if you do, frankly, I probably am going to think you're faking.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, for the sake of cleanliness of defense tables everywhere, like that's not a symptom. Okay, that's more of a sexual thing, and you know, I don't want to yuck your yum, but that's kind of gross.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it, and so that says to me pretty clearly that he did not claim to be mentally ill or incompetent before his trial.
Yeah.
And that he didn't try to extend that, like, he didn't ask for any sort of testing. And for 2 years after, nothing much happened, which is not actually a surprise, because that's around then, you know, 21 up to age 25, that's when the first signs of schizophrenia usually appear.
Yeah.
And it sounds like his had a lot to do with religion and God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he from one of the reports I read talked about he was seeing his victim in his cell with him.
Yeah, and he sometimes thought he was already executed.
Yeah, already dead, or that he was God himself.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of things, which when you are, it depends on the prison, but a lot of death row, you are held in isolation. And so you start to break a little, and you don't sleep well because the lights are always on and it's always really noisy. And so you start to get like sleep deprivation. You go a little psychotic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're actually psychotic. It's just the environment breaks people. And a lot of people find God when they go to prison.
Oh, yeah. That's very common.
So I think it took until he was in his mid to late 20s before anybody thought, hey, maybe this guy isn't faking. Or,
Yeah.
you know, maybe this guy's kind of fucked up.
Because I couldn't find anything talking about him having any symptoms or having any diagnosis before the murder.
Not at all. Or even for the first 2 years that he was in prison. So the crime happened, and he was also found guilty and sentenced in 1979. And the first appeal was in 1981.
Yeah.
And
see, and I didn't even put that together. That most of the time schizophrenia does not, which I knew, but I didn't even think about it, that it doesn't normally show up until mid-20s. And so it makes sense. Because that was one of the things my husband was like, well, there had to have been signs before, but not necessarily with that one.
Necessarily. Especially with schizophrenia, a lot of times you just kind of come across as a little quirky.
Yeah.
A little odd. Which, okay, black man in this deep south. Who are you going to show your symptoms to? And symptoms can manifest differently in different ethnicities, races, cultures. You know,
and time periods.
Yeah, what is appropriate for cultural? Like I'm sitting here wearing jeans right now. So in Elizabethan England, you know, late 1800s, even you know, I would have been looked at as incredibly screwed up. Right? Because women don't do that. And so let's extend, I mean, this is only 40 years ago, but if he'd been making eye contact with the wrong people, I mean, fucking what do we do to Emmett Till, right? So normal teenage behavior can be very different whether you're black or white at the time. And so he could have had symptoms, but they look a little bit different. You know, that schizophrenia has both what we call positive and negative symptoms, right? So the positive symptoms are what everybody sees. The things you have that other people don't have. So delusions, hallucinations, hearing voices, or, you know, whatever it might be, weird beliefs, maybe, that kind of thing. Then there's also the negative symptoms, which are things that other people have that you don't. But that's harder to see, right? So people with schizophrenia often have a harder time telling accurately what the temperature is. Like they're not good at gauging their own body. So they'll dress inappropriately for the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And so they actually learn, like, you know what? If I just wear a winter coat year round, I won't get frostbite.
That's interesting. I didn't
So
know
there's
that.
there's just certain like logic to it, even though it's like, dude, it's 80 degrees. Let's lose the coat. But they're not good at that. Like, they don't feel heat and cold in the same way because they have so much time in their life being told they're perceiving things wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That why not this too?
Yeah.
So one of the things also is a difficulty making eye contact and a difficulty paying attention or engaging in sort of simple communication, simple conversation.
But I can honestly say to this day, it's 2018. And in these parts of Arkansas, Black people are still struggling to make eye contact and start conversations with just anyone.
Yes.
Can you
100%.
imagine in 1979?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
And
exactly.
I'm not just saying this from hearsay. I'm saying I've witnessed this myself.
Right. No, 100%. You're making my point for me, and thank you. That what is normal behavior, and how do you tell what's normal behavior versus what is early signs of schizophrenia?
Yep.
Like, how do you parse those out? There's no real way, because culturally that's what's appropriate. Visual quotes here, appropriate.
Yeah.
And it's not. But when not everybody can behave in whatever, like, so who wrote the diagnostic symptoms for schizophrenia? Old white men.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of what they're writing are ways to keep other cultures from looking healthy.
Exactly.
We talk about, using the criminal justice system as a way to maintain the status quo between races. And that's there in the mental health system as well. It's just not talked about as much.
Yeah.
Because the mental health system tries to pretend like it's helping everybody. So
the resources for mental health to this day and age is just terrible in this state. I can't even imagine that we had any resources then, especially for a Black man.
Yeah. Certainly not voluntary ones.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I did not read through, because so between 1981 and 2003, he appealed 16 times.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the first pile of those was not successful.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had some pieces of success. Like at one point, his sentence was adjusted from death by the electric chair to life in prison, but then somehow it went back.
That's the part I couldn't, I saw that too, and they didn't go into detail at all.
And I wasn't able from here to pull up how the hell did that happen.
Mm-mm.
But that's pretty sick,
mm-hmm.
frankly. And then after that, there were claims of double jeopardy, which I would probably buy into.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I mean, I know you can obviously go back and do the sentencing phase again separately. And so maybe, I don't know. But the moral is that he went through all of these problems and all of these appeals, and this is when the symptoms were getting bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, they were taking him on and off medicine. I mean, that alone can really fuck a person up,
just the process of going on and off meds. Yeah.
I mean, just medicate a person for years and then take them off, and to let the symptom, to let it all come back. I can't imagine that would completely fuck up a person who is already having difficulties. You know what I mean?
Well, and I want to know, like, so here's the thing about competency is that for trial, like I talked about, the bar is pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty much, I wouldn't say universal in the U.S. because I'm sure that there are exceptions,
mm-hmm.
but across most of the country, you can, if it is demonstrable that there are medications you need in order to be forced to sit in the courtroom and understand what's going on,
mm-hmm.
you can be forced to take medication to establish competency.
Sorry, that we live by an Air Force base. Let me I don't know if you can hear it, so okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't even bother me in the least because I had kids. Whatever, it's pretty much the same.
Okay.
But so you can be forced, whether it's because you need anti-anxiety medication to be able to sit in a chair long enough, or ADHD medication to be able to sit in a chair long enough, or you need antipsychotic medication to be able to engage in the court process. You can be forced to take medication. It's hard, but even if you're not facing trial, you can be, under very specific circumstances, forced to take medication. And it's complicated, but basically, if you have hard enough time functioning in the real world, even if you're over 18, you can be appointed a guardian.
Yeah.
And the guardian can tell you how to spend your money, and the guardian can tell you where to live, and to some extent, the guardian can tell you who you can and cannot spend time with. But if the guardian tells you you have to take these medications and you disagree, you have to be taken to court and be appointed another guardian or another level of guardianship, depending on the state, in order to be forced to take medication. So it becomes very complicated. So like an 18, 19-year-old, if they have not been good at medication compliance, taking meds when you tell them, if they're over 18 and you know that if they don't take this medication, they're going off the rails, they have the choice not to. And you have to go through court proceedings twice to force it. And it's hard. It's hard to get somebody's freedoms taken away from them. And I am all on board for that. But I hope that it's extra hard when they're facing criminal proceedings, to really make sure, do they really need this medication if they don't want to take it? Yeah. And pretty much across the board, the answer is, if they are claiming that the only difference, and they meaning both the person and the doctors involved, if the claim is that the only reason that this person is not able to sit down and take part in their own trial is because they're not on meds, they're going to be put on meds. Yeah. And what can happen is situations where somebody can be effectively insane to the point of not being able to take part. And so they'll be hospitalized for several years, and then they're restored to sanity. And my hands are getting sore with all these visual quotes that you can't see.
I know.
But that 3, 4, 5, 10 years after the crime, if they're considered now competent to stand trial, they can be forced to stand trial. And they can be forced to continue taking medication if that's what it is that they need to stay stable. So
was that the Harper something they called it a Harper? I don't know. I don't have the word now. I thought I wrote it down, but
I accept that. Sure.
Yeah, I think it was something like that, because it's something I never heard of before. Reading through this case, and they, for so many years, it was mandatory. He had to take the medication.
And one of the challenges with him that I was reading about is that he would voluntarily take medication until he was getting close to trial for one of the appeals.
Yes.
And then he would try to go off the meds. To and there's that sort of dual-sided argument of, on the one hand, by choosing to go on the meds, he's showing enough competency to understand that the meds matter. And so he's choosing to go off them, meaning he's demonstrating an awareness of what he can and cannot handle. And so, okay, he's trying to fuck with the system. But on the other hand, then he's walking into the courtroom sort of his true self, and they're seeing him as he really is. Yeah. I can see both ways, right?
Yeah. My husband just kept going, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. And I'm like, I know. Yeah, you're right.
It is. But to me, the trick about it is, it's one thing for someone to go off a medication.
Yeah.
That is what it is. But if they are voluntarily choosing to go on and off at specific times, okay, now they're demonstrating they know what they're doing.
Exactly.
And so I'm a little more skeptical then. I'm not sure. I mean, he was involuntarily medicated for at least parts of his incarceration and for periods of time during these 16 appeals. And by 2003, he was done.
Yeah.
That he was refusing to fill out forms that his lawyers were putting in front of him.
Yeah, I think he even told his lawyer, just stop fighting it. Yeah.
Now you get into the next layer of competency. And this is the reason right here why I could not ever have been a forensic psychologist in a death penalty state.
Mm-hmm.
Because doing forensic psychology, you got like custody battles and shit like that, but you are also looking at another human being and deciding, that I play a role. I'm not in the jury.
Huge role.
But I play a role in what that jury decides. My words, I come to whatever belief I come to, and then my words are going to influence this other human being's life. And so you better be fucking sure of what you're saying, because that's a lot of weight. And if it's not a lot of weight, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yep.
So there's that. But I was able to cope with that level because I was also able to admit, like, look, I don't know about this. I don't know about that. And at the end of the day, I really wanted the jury to just make their decision with the full understanding of here's what I'm sure about and here's what I'm not. You go. But there's another level of competency that I didn't have to face in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, and that I never would. It's called competency to be executed. It's not enough. And let me back out for a second. That if somebody is not competent to stand trial, often that washes out before you ever have any competency hearings. Like, it's obvious to everybody. The prosecution, the defense, the judge, everybody looks at the person like, okay, yeah, you're fucked up. We're just going to admit you to a psych hospital and let the psychiatrists duke it out, and we're going to drop charges. Like, that's where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And so not very many people who show up in a criminal court are trying to argue not competent to stand trial anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's rare. And then of that little subset of people, not very many of them are successful at convincing the jury.
Yeah.
So I don't suggest to most people out there that they try it. It's just not going to go anywhere. But let's say you go through all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're nearing your execution date. You have to be seen again by a psychologist who determines whether you are competent to be executed. This blows my goddamn mind. It's not enough that we, the state, the jury, the judge, everybody has decided, yeah, kill him.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know we're killing you, and you have to know why.
And you have to wait for it. So it's not done fast.
No. And but that competency to be executed is not done until close to your execution date.
Yeah.
It's not done right after the trial. So all the appeals go through, and maybe you go through another round of competency to stand trial again, but they wait until, like, not last minute, but last minute for competency to be executed. So you can't even go off your meds and just live in your world of delusions and hallucinations for 10 years until they kill you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be restored to competency before they'll, put the needle in or flip the switch or whatever they're going to do. I could not have coped myself with knowing that. And, knowing that my decision is basically, ultimately, aside from the governor, my decision would have been the second most important.
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to do it at all.
No, I can't even imagine. So, ultimately, this guy was remedicated because he's sitting. I mean, now in his case, like, a lot of people also imagine, like, without medications, you're like sitting in the corners laughing and drooling, chewing on crayons. It's not that fun. He's having these delusions. The spirit of this woman was coming after him. He's already dead. God hates him, or he is God. Like, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And now his lawyers keep sitting him down and asking him all these really complicated questions that he has to cope with. Even medicated, that's not easy. And ultimately, he said no more.
Yep.
And Louisiana, as far as I know, is the only state in the country that says you cannot force medications on someone in order to reestablish competency to be executed.
Mm-hmm.
So Louisiana has said, look, you can make them be medicated if that's what you need to do to make them stand trial.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, you can let them sit in the corner and drool and chew on their crayons or be immersed in their symptoms or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You can do that. Fine. But every other state has said, go for it. Pump them back up with meds. And you can give injections for delusions. Like there are ways to avoid oral medications.
Mm-hmm.
So you can force it.
Yeah.
It's not even like, they can tongue their medications. They can cheek them. They can pretend to take it and spit it back out. Nope. Haldol has an injectable form. Risperdal, several of them.
Yeah.
So, 49 states plus a couple of, districts and so on can do whatever if they want to. Now, obviously, not all of us do the death penalty dance.
Yeah.
But you can.
Yeah. In Arkansas, the more and more I research cases, we have. I haven't looked up the numbers, but I actually want to now. But we have executed or sentenced to death a lot of people. A lot here.
It sounds like people are for it.
Oh yeah, the majority for sure. Yeah.
What do you think they think it accomplishes?
This is so sad, but this is so true. You can go on KATV, one of our news stations, websites, and you can go into any case that involves, and I'm just going to be blatant about this, that involves a Black person. And if you read the comments, this could be a robbery. No violence whatsoever. And they will literally, the things they will say in the comments, that person needs to be shot. They need to be hung. It's sick. It's something I'll never get used to. I moved here from California where people don't say those kind of things. You know what I mean? But here, they're open about it. They, our neighborhood group once posted about someone going around siphoning gas from their vehicles, and a person said, well, I'll have my shotgun ready. And I actually asked them, so you're going to shoot someone and kill them over gas? He said, yep. I don't know their thought process because it doesn't make sense to me.
California still has the death penalty, doesn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
But people are more hesitant. People are at least
yes,
able to sit and sort of compare crime, punishment, all that shit.
Right? But they still have it. Yes, I believe. Don't quote me on that because I haven't actually looked it up, but I think they do.
And they have a death row, Scott Peterson. So.
Oh, yep.
It's just it's a different mindset, though. If California at least doesn't sort of revel in like, woohoo, death penalty, and it seems like in the Deep South, they're like, I'll shoot you over any damn thing, and it's not just about stand your ground or castle doctrine kind of stuff. It's about like, yeah, I'll shoot somebody who's stealing my neighbor's gas.
Yeah,
and that's kind of terrifying. But so what that means is, I was reading about the guy. So Singleton was executed on January 6th, 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And there was supposed to be another guy, Roberts, who was supposed to be executed on the same day. Roberts having been measurably, IQ tested at like 82, which 82 is barely able to live in society without support. And that's just how he was tested on that day. IQ tests are always given with a plus or minus of about 5 points.
Yes.
And so if it comes out as 77, he is not able to function on that day. You know what I'm saying? And so it really depends on sort of which day of the week you test somebody, where their score will actually fall.
Yep.
And that's of a formal IQ testing. And then if you actually grill somebody, you can get somebody who has an IQ of 100 who really can't get through day to day and keep themselves alive.
Yeah.
And you get other people who have an IQ of 60 who can basically function within certain supports on their own, you know?
That's my next case. You wait. It's execution with someone as low as 60.
And it's horrifying to me because that was Roberts whose execution was stayed. And it was going to be like, what, the third time since the 80s that Arkansas executed 2 people in the same day? I mean, Jesus Christ. You know, what's the fucking rush? Oh my God.
Well, you remember recently the big controversial with the I think it was 8, and they were rushing because our one of the dosage or the lethal injections was expiring. I think it's expired now. I believe I read a news story like very recent that all of our medicine is expired now. I don't know that I want to say that's what it was. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I think it's all expired now because they were rushing those ones not too long ago. Last year, I think it was. Yeah. They like to do that though.
Crazy. I mean, just crazy.
I mean, if you ask me, they get off on the shit. Sick. But
it's wild. I mean, because, okay, so the reason, federally as well as most states, the reason that they have said, here's why you can only kill somebody if they know you're killing them and why, is that, well, first of all, we're not really sure that it gets adequate revenge unless they know what's happening. A doubtful retributive power is the snotty criminal justice way of wording it, but it's retribution, is this adequate revenge if they don't know you're doing it to them. And then next is that it's not setting an example. Well, I'll tell you what, nothing in the criminal justice system is adequate deterrence for anybody if they really want to commit a crime. You know what I mean? Like, it's only deterrence for people who are already not a danger to society.
Yeah.
But anybody who's willing to break the fucking rules doesn't give a shit. The prison's there. They know it's there. They don't care.
Yep.
They're not stupid. So deterrence isn't a deal. And that killing somebody who doesn't know you're killing them offends humanity. That is the actual phrase that they use. It offends humanity. I would like to cordially invite them to go fuck themselves, because I would argue that it's no more offensive to execute someone who doesn't know you're executing them than it is to execute someone who does, and in fact, perhaps more offensive. So,
well, of course, it's going to be more. It's going to be more offensive to you if you know what's going on. I mean, that's just.
It's just one of those, like, do we even read our own laws? Do we even no, we don't. We don't read our own. Sorry, never mind. I'm just being silly. So, I burst into flames. So this guy, am I saying that he shouldn't have been executed? Okay, yeah, I am. I really am. But if I had been on that jury, and that is what the law was, and somehow I was put through on the jury, even though I'm against the death penalty, but let's pretend. I would have probably voted for death penalty, because here is a murder that was committed during the process of a robbery. As far as we know, as far as we can tell, all the money was gone. No reason to think she hid the money, stabbed herself in the neck, and blamed him.
Yeah.
Right? So could I have... I'd like to hope that I could follow the laws of the place that I'm in. Realistically, I would have fought tooth and nail against it. But the law was pretty clear.
Exactly, yeah.
So as long as that's the law, it's the law, and that's not my... I am not a crusader. But I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. But
I
life in
don't.
prison, I don't even like life in prison without parole because I feel like why bother? Why bother? Why not just kill him?
Mm-hmm.
You know, frankly, if we're going to say we're 100% sure that this is who did it, and we're 100% sure that he can never, ever be improved, well, why bother? There's no answer.
No,
you know,
there's
if you got
not.
an answer, bring it. You know?
Wish I did.
But so am I 100% in favor? No, I would rather say life with parole and let the parole board sort them out. You know, and get more psychologists on the criminal justice payroll and get more parole board members on the payroll with better training.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they decide to never let him out, that's okay. Let's make that a group decision. Fine, fair. So I don't know, but I don't like this case. I don't like it at all. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. But it mattered a lot in terms of legal precedent.
It did. And around, that time into the 80s, this was, I almost want to say, it was a trend. I feel like, because I noticed so many cases around that time that involved a Black man was like this, either low IQ and, confessions. That's the case I'm working on now, is they believe it was a forced confession, just like West Memphis 3. That was around the 90s, Mm-hmm. But they weren't Black men, but they were still.
No, but Jesse Miss Kelly was not a high functioning individual. And honestly, no. Nikki, I could make you confess.
Yeah,
I could make you confess to the West Memphis 3 case if I wanted to. I mean, not to be facetious, but kind of. I mean, it's not that hard to get a false confession out of somebody if you're really,
especially if you're trained in it. you know. So, I never thought I would see so many cases that involve this kind of shadiness. That's the only word I have for it. But it's controversial.
Well, and it's just a nightmare because it wouldn't be that hard for you or for me or, I mean, damn near anybody to end up pulled into something like this.
And that is fucking scary.
It really is. So on that note, anything else you want to throw in before we?
No, we literally covered everything that we could. We started with this. There wasn't. I did read. To touch on the religious part, his final words. I don't know. You saw that, right? That his final words he wrote out, including religious verses and everything. So that just goes in more with what you said, and I think that did play into his hallucinations and all that.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you read, and it's this long, sort of rambling, disjointed, weird phrases. This is my last will and testament at one point, I think, and just I didn't even remember. I'm not looking at it now, and I there was no way. It was weird for sure, and just really didn't make sense. But I'm sure to him it did. The blind think I'm playing a game.
Yeah.
They deny me, refusing existence, but everybody takes the place of another. You have taught me what you have done, or what you want done, and I will not let you down. God bless. Like, what the fuck? I mean, but that is schizophrenic speech.
Yeah.
That sort of disjointed, it's not that different from ADHD. That sort of, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to go all over, I'm going to go here, because that's where their brain is going. It's just ADHD mixed in with problems with perception.
Yep.
And so that I read that and I think, yeah, that's schizophrenia. No shit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I want him living next door to me?
No.
Not unmedicated?
Mm-mm.
No.
And that's where I think that whole more of the slippery slope comes in because, okay, well, he's okay when he's medicated, but how are we going to make sure he's medicated every single day? That's
what I'm saying about there are injections.
Yeah. But I mean, is he going to, I need to know, I guess, more. I don't exactly know what happens if a person gets off on insanity. Like, do they just forever? I only know of one case, the one in Canada with that
Vincent Lee.
Yeah, who has been released into the public. I don't think I've ever heard of it happening here, but there's just so much.
Well, and that one, like there are. I worked in a group home once upon a time before I started. While I was working on my master's, and so a group home is adults who are not able to live by themselves, on their own, but they are able to function with supports.
Gotcha. I mean, it's basically a group home for kids, but it's for adults.
Yeah, a lot the same. And the thing was that there were people who would not maintain their meds. They just would flatly refuse to take them. They, whatever. And they would get, I wouldn't go so far as dangerous.
Yeah.
But they would get unpredictable more to themselves than anything else. Like their personal hygiene would go off. There are a lot of ties between like schizophrenia and diabetes, for instance. And so if you stop taking care of yourself mentally, your physical symptoms can go off the rails. And so there were people that had to be effectively forcibly medicated.
Yeah. I'm type 1 diabetic. I didn't know if you knew that.
No, but so you get what I'm saying. Like if you stop taking insulin, the bad shit can happen. And so the state would, this is what I'm saying about it's hard to make someone take medication. You can take their money away, but forcing them to put a chemical in their body is different. But effectively, if it is proven that they cannot be safe off their meds because they won't take their insulin, for instance, or because they have a habit of, like, we had one woman who every time she went off her meds, she would get pregnant. And the problem was both that she was completely unable to care for these children. She had 6 that had been taken by the state. And the father of at least 4 of those children was her own father.
Oh my gosh.
So you see why medication was a really important thing for her.
Oh yeah. I can tell you the past few months that I've went through all this, my sugar levels have been insane, just horrible. And you think that's not triggering depression? You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people don't realize that, but with type 1 diabetes comes so much more. And that's with anything. And then people who suffer from mental illness, it's very common for them to go off of their drugs, because when they're off their drugs, they get that high. And they want
and also, you forget what day of the week it is. You forget, you think, like, legitimately believe, I already took my meds today. What day is it? I don't know. So there are certain people who are deliberately not taking their meds. There are other people who just and they know that they get sick if they take them too often.
I have to give Russell his Keppra every day, because he will be, you have epilepsy, have seizures, you know what it does to your memory.
Exactly.
He'll forget. Did I take my meds?
Forget. I don't remember if I took my meds this morning. I have to be super, for a while I had to be on, those, what the fuck are they called? Where you take one a day. It's the little plastic thing you count out your meds for a week. In order to know, to be able to look. Like bang, bang, morning, afternoon, every day. For a while I was on that. I've gotten better at it now. But my schedule went off as recently as April of this year, because I got into the podcasting deal. I got excited about it. I was staying up too late. I was pushing myself too hard. And I only missed like 2 days, but that was enough to throw me into a seizure. So I'm in the hospital for 3 days. Like,
he does that with his music, right? That's
I totally believe it, because
I will get up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. and come in here and say, baby, if you don't go to sleep, you could have a seizure. He does the same exact thing. It's definitely part of the disease.
And so that's one of the, like, so why can we force people to take their meds?
I feel like diagnosed OCD has a lot to do with epilepsy. The manic
they go together
too. Oh gosh.
Depends on where in the brain the epilepsy is.
Yep.
But
And
you know, see, mine, the lesion is exactly in the right prefrontal cortex, which happens to be. Stay with me on this one because this is awesome.
Well, I learned from you on this because, you know, we're just getting into it. So
yeah. So I this makes me fucking crazy. It's one of the little fun things, you know. So I never had epilepsy. I used to get migraine, and so I've had a shitload of EEGs, and they were always clean, clean. You know, when you're getting migraine for no reason, they want to make sure there's not a tumor or whatever, not epilepsy, none of the above. I just had migraine, like literally 3 a week. It was shitty. I didn't like it. And that went away when I had a hysterectomy, but that doesn't work for everybody somehow. So there's that. And then out of the blue, 2 years ago, I suddenly fell into what they call status epilepticus, which for those listening in on the sidelines is 4 hours of nonstop seizure. My God, my muscles sore after that. Let me tell you.
One seizure makes you. So yeah,
it's like a whole body workout, and like your fingertips hurt. I mean, everything. My hair
your senses.
Oh, I didn't know my own name for a while afterwards. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. So that was out of the blue. And the location of the lesion, they did an EEG after that, and now I have a lesion on my brain. And they're like, oh, you've always had it. No, I haven't. But most neurologists are kind of like, their attitude toward neurology is like mine with psychology. Like, I don't care how you got here, just this is where you are now.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
And that's where that's how I am. And so I don't know why it pisses me off that that's how they are. You know, but it does. It makes me crazy. Because I'm like, where did this lesion come from? Well, I don't know, but it's there now.
That's me. I want to know why his epilepsy just kicked in for no reason at a certain age. I want to know why the EEG showed nothing for the first few years, and he was diagnosed with PNES, you know, pseudo seizures. They weren't pseudo, okay? I held him when he had them.
Right. But if they're not witnessed, then they tend to be, you know, skeptical, whatever. But so mine,
that's why I videotaped the last one.
Lasted as long as it did, they would be like, oh yeah, look, she's still doing it. Awesome. But so whatever. The moral is I have a seizure on my right prefrontal cortex, which I not being a neurosurgeon, I don't remember all of the areas of the brain like I used to. Like I know vaguely. You know, your sense of smell and memories are in the back of your brain. And so right up here in the prefrontal cortex, which again, I'm pointing to and you can't see, but it's right there.
So did yours ever affect your smell?
No, mine's in the front, not in the back.
So his is in the back then, because his affects his smell so bad. And oh God, you gave me chills. You're like answering. You're better than a doctor. His are in the back.
Shit up. It's fine.
No, his are in the back then.
And you can get more than one lesion over time. You know, if you're prone to extra seizures, they can like seizures themselves can cause lesions, which I believe that's what happened in my case. But so you know, a lesion is basically just like a scar in your brain. And if you're having like if you get struck by lightning, you get scars on the outside of your body. Yeah. So I don't know why it surprises me that having effectively prolonged electrical shock inside my brain creates a scar inside my brain. Like I don't know why that messes with me, but it messes with me. So. And so mine is in the prefrontal cortex, which is where what's called executive functioning is, which is your ability to like plan, carry out, and then review a plan afterward, you know, is an action. Like I'm going to get up the chair, I'm going to get a banana and I'm going to eat it and I'm going to throw out the peel. Right. That's what normal grownups can do. And now I have a hard time with that, which is a fancy way of saying now I have ADHD and I never used to. And so now I can make plans for 15 different things, but not start them. Or I can make plans and start things, but I can't wrap them up. Or I can't look back and go, okay, that didn't work so well. Let's not do that anymore. Like I have a really hard time with that and I never used to. And it's because this lesion, this scar in my brain is exactly in that part of the brain that does that. So what helps ADHD? Stimulants. I can't take stimulants because they tend to trigger seizures. seizures are what caused my ADHD. So you're seeing this circle that I'm in.
Oh,
and I'm like,
yes.
Son of a motherless goat. Like, this is ridiculous. So
And honestly, so many things trigger it. It kind of opens my eyes to how I've been with him. Don't do this. You might trigger. I mean, honestly, what kind of life is that? Always stressing. But that's how I was. I'd be like, no, you need to not do this because it might trigger. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But everything, it's crazy. Sorry. I guess they're collecting trash right now. I hope you can't hear that outside.
Yeah, whatever. Emily's walking around overhead.
Mom.
Yeah. But it's that's part of what wraps around back with all of this, though, is that like I know when I'm about to have a seizure, and I never had seizures before, but my body gets fucked up. Yeah. And I start to have very bizarre thoughts.
Do you have deja vu feeling?
Well, it's like deja vu or like an aura, and I don't know how to describe it.
Well, that's what we call them. He gets deja
my
vu
whole
auras.
Body is just like, I don't like it. And luckily, the second time, so the first time I was asleep when I went into the major status epilepticus, and now I think I've had many seizures, petit mal that didn't ping on anybody's radar and that I didn't tell people about because I wanted to keep driving. So there's that. But but you call the neurologist, you get your meds adjusted, it's fine. But then in April, I only missed like maybe 2 doses. We're not talking. I went weeks without.
Yeah.
I missed like maybe a day's worth, maybe a day and a half. And I was sitting down here trying to edit actually. And I got this very or I was coming out of my skin. This feeling of like my fingers and toes felt weird. And I just had this, I don't like it. And it's like the aversive kind of feeling that you get if somebody does something that just grosses you out.
Yes.
Whether it's chewing with their mouth.
I don't know. But
whatever.
He's explained these same words to me. So that's why,
Yeah. And I'm alone downstairs. I'm 2 floors away from my husband. And I was like, something is not right. And maybe it's nothing, but I'm going upstairs. And I went upstairs and I woke him up and I was like, I think I'm having a seizure. And that is the last thing I remember until I woke up in the hospital. Ugh. And so I take that shit real serious now.
Yeah. This last time scared him. He's on top of everything now.
It is terrifying.
Well, and I think it really got to him was I recorded it. Because I was so sick of hearing these are, well, we can't detect. No, I recorded it and I showed them, and I had left the hospital room to go get him something to drink when he was in the last day. And I came back and he was like, just looking at me. And I said, well, what's wrong? And he's like, I watched the video. And it makes me want to cry now because it totally, he's like, I can't believe you have to go through that. And I was like, it's my job. Not my job, but No,
as a partner. Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard knowing it, and it's hard being on the sick side.
And it's hard.
I think it's in many ways it's harder to be on the caregiver side.
Yeah.
I in a nothing related to epilepsy, but I got real sick in 2010 and I spent a week and a half in a coma. And while I had a lot of difficulty with that coming back, relearning a lot of things, and I didn't know how to write, and I didn't know names, including my they had a poster on the side of my bed where they had written it was the kids. It was Emily was 10 and Jacob was 5 at the time, and so they had worked with the kids on my name is and my favorite music is and here's photos of my kids, blah blah blah, and they put it together for them. And sort of as a reminder to caregivers, this is a person in the bed. It's not just a lump in the bed. But I used to lie on my side and stare at it and study it. Because I couldn't remember all 3 of my kids' names. I had to study this and I had to relearn all of these things. And so that's hard, right? That's no good. But I guarantee it was harder for my husband and my kids.
Yeah.
Just shitty stuff to have to live through. And so
you just don't want to see the person you love in that much pain.
Yeah, or broken, or dealing with the fact that, like, I am not the girl while I'm married.
Yeah.
We got married when I was 22, and I guess I had Emily when I was 22. We got married when I was older, 24, but still, babies. You know, Willem and I lived together in college, and so, like, he married a certain person, and I am not that person.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel like this terrible pointless guilt. But you know, and I would do the same for him, and you know, in my way, have in ways when he has crashed, but still, it's not the same. So, you talk about that's just from missing a couple of doses or from having an illness that could not have been prevented or could not have been predicted even. And so you talk about, like, how can you know that somebody's safe in the community? Well, you can't ever know, but the best you can do is put them on injected medications because they last for like 2 weeks.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
See that?
And so therefore you take them to the clinic every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And if they refuse, you have a guardianship in place so that you can have them admitted to the hospital at the blink of an eye.
Yeah. And I could see that working for sure with someone who has that support. You know?
And so you just have to have it. You have to have the whole deal behind with the state. Like, the state has to give you the resources for people to know how to recognize it and to be able to report it and to have a bed to put them in. You know, both in a group home in the community and then in a hospital, you know, because there are people who cannot be safely maintained anywhere else.
Exactly.
So without people who can diagnose that and then follow up, you know, because I can do the best diagnosis in the world, but if there's nobody to follow up, then why bother?
And you have to continue to follow up too, you know, forever. I mean, that's just how, you know, otherwise there's a danger to them or everyone around them. Thanks again for downloading episode 15. I want to give a special thanks to our newest patrons, Minds of Madness Podcast. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for a promo from them as well. I also want to thank Alyssa F. and Mary F. Now stay tuned for a few promos.
911, what's your emergency?
Every 60 seconds, a person is murdered somewhere in the world.
There was a shootout in my house. I can't believe it.
What causes ordinary people to do unthinkable things?
He stabbed me in my neck. And he says, look how easily I could kill you.
The Minds of Madness is a true crime podcast that examines the most disturbing criminal minds. We shed a light on the devastating impact these violent crimes have on the victims and their families.
When you get calls in the night, you know they're not good or they're wrong numbers.
You'll hear about the incredible strength of the survivors and what they did to fight back.
I was studying his face because I was thinking, if I get out of this, I'm going to get you someday.
Subscribe to the Minds of Madness podcast today on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play.
Mens rea is the legal principle of intent that must be proved in a number of crimes, such as murder. It means literally, the guilty mind. The Mens Rea podcast explores the most notorious crimes from Ireland and the UK, and the court cases that followed. Every fortnight, a new case is discussed. So if you like hard-hitting, in-depth true crime podcasts, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and subscribe to the Mens Rea podcast today.